Hello, my dear listeners. My name is Kishore Ganesh, and I know it's been a while, but hey, let's get into the episode. In this episode of the Vocal About Visuals podcast, I'll be reviewing the Malayalam movie Marco, starring Unni Mukundan, Siddique, Jagadish, Abhimanyu Shammy Thilakan, and a ton of other actors, plus about 2 petroleum tankers full of fake blood and 2 shipping containers full of weapons. It is written and directed by Haneef Adeni. Now, if I were to give you a slight inkling of the plot of Marco, I would say it is John Wick meets Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat, the actual video game, not the movies. The movie is undoubtedly a theatre experience and something that an adult audience member needs to experience, because the places where this film goes is not something that one gets to witness on the Indian screen quite often. But I primarily had an issue with the hyperbole online about how this was the best thing since sliced bread, as they say. The only reason why people have gotten so giddy with excitement about this movie is because this movie goes all the way in terms of gore and violence. And by this I mean on whom the violence is inflicted on, in addition to how the violence is inflicted. What I mean is, there are certain rules to violence in movies. They spare certain characters even if everything around them is going up in flames, but in this film, the script and screenplay deliberately go after them, and that's the shock value. In fact, till the lowest point of the hero, as far as the hero story is concerned, I was watching the film with this thought that what is really so quote-unquote epic about this film that everyone was raving about it. But then at that lowest point is where the writer-director Haneef chose to cross all lines of movie conditioning for the audience, and that made me sit up and violently at that. Then the hyperbole made sense. But this reaction from the audience was elicited very, very cleverly by the writing. So kudos to Haneef for that. You see, he uses his technique of keeping the violence in the film on an upward trajectory, almost like an ascending graph. Earlier in the movie, the violence is not imaginative. It is in fact quite boring. Additionally, the violence doesn't appear on screen as often. There is a build-up to each of the action set pieces, and then let's say we have a 6-on-10 set piece, followed by a 7-on-10 set piece, in terms of both imagination and brutality. And they gradually escalate on both counts, with the crescendo set at the aforementioned lowest point. But the lowest point also happens to be very close to the climax, and the movie ends with the visceral impact of the lowest point, followed by an avenging climactic sequence that actually has a Mortal Kombat fatality written in. So, of course, when you leave the theatre, you leave on a high. And that explains the great buzz about this film. And honestly, that almost got yours truly as well. But then, about a day or two later, the novelty kind of wore off. Because a movie cannot just be about 1 or 2 sequences. There needs to be something more to it. Only the bond between brothers angle works in the film. But the issue with that is that everything related to this aspect is derivative, except maybe small portions of the violence. Basically, the movie for large parts is derivative, but it blows itself up into this huge form with the hype and fancy costumes. And the clever writing, gorgeous cinematography, and the slick editing cons the audience into accepting that that monstrous form is real. Essentially, what I'm saying is that Marco is nowhere close to bad, but is also nowhere close to that famous meme with Martin Scorsese in it that goes, quote-unquote, "That's what I call cinema." I had to say this not because the movie called itself quote-unquote cinema, but a lot of online buzz around the film claimed it to be so. So, sure, if you are an adult with a strong stomach and will to not look away from the scenes, please do go watch it. Others, just watch John Wick. Once again, my name is Kishore Ganesh. This is the Vocal About Visuals podcast, and thank you, my dear listeners, for your time and for listening. Please do give this podcast a follow on your preferred podcast platforms and on YouTube. Marco is available to stream right now on Sony Live. Thank you.